Judges chapter 15. But it happened after a while, in the time of wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a young goat, and he said, I will go into my wife into the room. But her father wouldn't allow him to go in. Her father said, I most certainly thought that you had utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to your companion. Isn't her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please, take her instead. Samson said to them, This time I will be blameless in regard of the Philistines when I harm them. Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and took torches, and turned tail to tail, and put a torch in the midst between every 2 tails. When he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and burnt up both the shocks and the standing grain, and also the olive groves. Then the Philistines said, Who has done this? They said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion. The Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire. Samson said to them, If you behave like this, surely I will be avenged of you, and after that I will cease. He struck them hip and thigh with a great slaughter, and he went down and lived in the cleft of the rock of Etam. Then the Philistines went up and encamped in Judah, and spread themselves in Lehi. The men of Judah said, Why have you come up against us? They said, We've come up to bind Samson, to do to him as he has done to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Etam, and said to Samson, Don't you know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us? He said to them, As they did to me, so I have done to them. They said to him, We have come down to bind you, that we may deliver you into the hand of the Philistines. Samson said to them, Swear to me that you will not fall on me yourselves. They spoke to him, saying, No, but we will bind you fast and deliver you into their hand, but surely we will not kill you. They bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted as they met him, and the Spirit of Yahweh came mightily on him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands dropped from off his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and put forth his hand and took it and struck 1,000 men therewith. Samson said, With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps and heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have struck 1,000 men. It happened, when he had made an end of speaking, that he cast away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramoth Lehi. He was very thirsty, and called on Yahweh and said, You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now shall I die for thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? But God split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out of it. When he had drunk, his spirit came again, and he revived. Therefore its name was called En-Hakkore, which is in Lehi to this day. He judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. Judges chapter 16. Samson went to Gaza, and saw there a prostitute, and went into her. It was told the Gazites, saying, Samson is here. They surrounded him and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all the night, saying, Let be until morning light, then we will kill him. Samson lay until midnight, and arose at midnight, and laid hold of the doors of the gate of the city, and the 2 posts, and plucked them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of the mountain that is before Hebron. It came to pass afterward, that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came up to her, and said to her, Entice him, and see in which his great strength lies, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Delilah said to Samson, Please tell me where your great strength lies, and what you might be bound to afflict you. Samson said to her, If they bind me with 7 green cords that were never dried, Then shall I become weak and be as another man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green cords which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had an ambush waiting in the inner room. She said to him, "The Philistines are on you, Samson." He broke the cords as a string of tow is broken when it touches the fire. So his strength was not known. Delilah said to Samson, "Behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now please tell me with which you might be bound." He said to her, "If they only bind me with new ropes, with which no work has been done, then shall I become weak and be as another man." So Delilah took new ropes and bound him therewith, and said to him, "The Philistines are on you, Samson." The ambush was waiting in the inner room. He broke them off his arms like a thread. Delilah said to Samson, "Until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me with what you might be bound." He said to her, "If you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web." She fastened it with the pin and said to him, "The Philistines are on you, Samson." He awakened out of his sleep and plucked away the pin of the beam and the web. She said to him, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength lies." It happened when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul was troubled to death. He told her all his heart, and he said to her, "No razor has ever come on my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then my strength will go from me, and I will become weak and be like any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up this once, for he has told me all his heart." Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in her hand. She made him sleep on her knees, and she called for a man and shaved off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. She said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." He awoke out of his sleep and said, "I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." But he didn't know that Yahweh had departed from him. The Philistines laid hold on him and put out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass, and he ground at the mill in the prison. However, the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaved. The lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice, for they said, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hand." When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, "Our God has delivered our enemy and the destroyer of our country, who has slain many of us, into our hand." It happened when their hearts were merry that they said, "Call for Samson, that he may entertain us." They called for Samson out of the prison, and he performed before them. They set him between the pillars, and Samson said to the boy who held him by the hand, "Allow me to feel these pillars whereupon the house rests, that I may lean on them." Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there, and there were on the roof about 3,000 men and women who saw while Samson performed. Samson called to Yahweh and said, "Lord Yahweh, remember me, please, and strengthen me, please, only this once, God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested and leaned on them, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." He bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell on the lords and on all the people who were therein. So the dead that he killed at his death were more than those who he killed in his life. Then his brothers and all the house of his father came down and took him, and brought him up, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, in the burial site of Manoah, his father. He judged Israel 20 years. Judges chapter 17. There was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah. He said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke it in my ears, behold, the silver is with me, I took it." His mother said, "Blessed be my son of Yahweh." He restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother, and his mother said, "I most certainly dedicate the silver to Yahweh from my hand for my son, to make an engraved image and a molten image. Now therefore I will restore it to you." When he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave them to the founder, who made of it an engraved image and a molten image, and it was in the house of Micah. The man Micah had a house of gods, and he made an ephod and teraphim, and consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. There was a young man out of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he lived there. The man departed out of the city, out of Bethlehem, Judah, to live where he could find a place, and he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he traveled. Micah said to him, "Where did you come from?" He said to him, "I am a Levite of Bethlehem, Judah, and I am looking for a place to live." Micah said to him, "Dwell with me, and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver per year, a suit of clothing, and your food." So the Levite went in. The Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man was to him as one of his sons. Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that Yahweh will do good to me, since I have a Levite to my priest." Judges chapter 18. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in, for to that day their inheritance had not fallen to them among the tribes of Israel. The children of Dan sent of their family 5 men from their whole number, men of valor, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to search it. And they said to them, "Go, explore the land." They came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they knew the voice of the young man, the Levite, and they turned aside there and said to him, "Who brought you here? What do you do in this place? What do you have here?" He said to them, "Thus and thus has Micah dealt with me, and he has hired me, and I am become his priest." They said to him, "Please, ask counsel of God, that we may know whether our way which we go shall be prosperous." The priest said to them, "Go in peace. Your way in which you go is before Yahweh." Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and saw the people who were therein, how they lived in security in the way of the Sidonians, quiet and secure, for there was none in the land, possessing authority, that might put them to shame in anything, and they were far from the Sidonians, and had no dealings with any man. They came to their brothers, to Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brothers said to them, "What do you say?" They said, "Arise, and let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. Do you stand still? Don't be slothful to go, and to enter in to possess the land. When you go, you shall come to a secure people, and the land is large, for God has given it into your hand, a place where there is no want of anything that is in the earth." There set forth from there of the family of the Danites, out of Zorah and out of Eshtaol, 600 men girt with weapons of war. They went up and encamped in Kiriath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they called that place Mahana Dan to this day. Behold, it is behind Kiriath Jearim. They passed there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who went to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to their brothers, "Do you know that there is in these houses an ephod and teraphim and an engraved image and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you have to do." They turned aside there and came to the house of the young man, the Levite, even to the house of Micah, and asked him of his welfare. The 600 men girt with their weapons of war, who were of the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who went to spy out the land went up, and came in there, and took the engraved image, and the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image, and the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men girt with weapons of war. When these went into Micah's house, and fetched the engraved image, the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They said to him, "Hold your peace, put your hand on your mouth, and go with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be priest to the house of one man, or to be priest to a tribe and a family in Israel?" The priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod and the teraphim and the engraved image, and went in the midst of the people. So they turned and departed, and put the little ones and the livestock and the goods before them. When they were a good way from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near to Micah's house were gathered together, and overtook the children of Dan. They cried to the children of Dan. They turned their faces and said to Micah, "What ails you that you come with such a company?" He said, "You have taken away my gods which I made, and the priest, and have gone away. And what more do I have? How then do you say to me, 'What ails you?'" The children of Dan said to him, "Don't let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall on you and you lose your life with the lives of your household." The children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. They took that which Micah had made, and the priest whom he had, and came to Laish, to a people quiet and secure, and struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burnt the city with fire. There was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with any man, and it was in the valley that lies by Beth Rehob. They built the city and lived therein. They called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born to Israel. However, the name of the city was Laish at first. The children of Dan set up for themselves the engraved image, and Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set them up Micah's engraved image, which he made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Judges chapter 19. It happened in those days, when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite living on the farther side of the hill country of Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. His concubine played the prostitute against him, and went away from him to her father's house to Bethlehem, Judah, and was there the space of 4 months. Her husband arose, and went after her to speak kindly to her, to bring her again, having a servant with him and a couple of donkeys. And she brought him into her father's house. And when the father of the young lady saw him, he rejoiced to meet him. His father-in-law, the young lady's father, retained him, and he stayed with him 3 days. So they ate and drank and lodged there. It happened on the 4th day that they arose early in the morning, and he rose up to depart. And the young lady's father said to his son-in-law, "Strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and afterward you shall go your way." So they sat down, ate, and drank, both of them together, and the young lady's father said to the man, "Please, be pleased to stay all night, and let your heart be merry." The man rose up to depart, but his father-in-law urged him, and he lodged there again. He rose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart, and the young lady's father said, "Please, strengthen your heart and stay until the day declines." And they both ate. When the man rose up to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the young lady's father, said to him, "Behold, now the day draws toward evening. Please stay all night. Behold, the day grows to an end. Lodge here, that your heart may be merry, and tomorrow go on your way early, that you may go home." But the man wouldn't stay that night, but he rose up and departed, and came over against Jebus, the same as Jerusalem. And there were with him a couple of donkeys saddled. His concubine also was with him. When they were by Jebus, the day was far spent, and the servant said to his master, Please come and let us turn aside into this city of the Jebusites, and lodge in it. His master said to him, We won't turn aside into the city of a foreigner, that is not of the children of Israel, but we will pass over to Gibeah. He said to his servant, Come and let us draw near to one of these places, and we will lodge in Gibeah or in Ramah. So they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down on them near to Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They turned aside there to go in to lodge in Gibeah, and he went in and sat him down in the street of the city, for there was no man who took them into his house to lodge. Behold, there came an old man from his work out of the field at evening. Now the man was of the hill country of Ephraim, and he lived in Gibeah. But the men of the place were Benjamites. He lifted up his eyes and saw the wayfaring man in the street of the city, and the old man said, Where are you going? Where did you come from? He said to him, We are passing from Bethlehem, Judah, to the farther side of the hill country of Ephraim. I am from there, and I went to Bethlehem, Judah. I am going to the house of Yahweh, and there is no man who takes me into his house. Yet there is both straw and provender for our donkeys, and there is bread and wine also for me, and for your handmaid, and for the young man who is with your servants. There is no want of anything. The old man said, Peace be to you. Howsoever, let all your wants lie on me. Only don't lodge in the street. So he brought him into his house, and gave the donkeys fodder, and they washed their feet, and ate and drank. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain base fellows, surrounded the house, beating at the door. And they spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may have sex with him. The master of the house, went out to them and said to them, No, my brothers, please don't act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, don't do this folly. Behold, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out now. Humble them and do with them what seems good to you, but to this man don't do any such folly. But the men wouldn't listen to him. So the man laid hold of his concubine and brought her out to them, and they had sex with her and abused her all night until the morning, and when the day began to dawn, they let her go. Then came the woman in the dawning of the day and fell down at the door of the man's house where her lord was, until it was light. Her lord rose up in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, and behold, the woman his concubine was fallen down at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, Get up, and let's be going. But no one answered. Then he took her up on the donkey, and the man rose up and went to his place. When he was come into his house, he took a knife and laid hold on his concubine and divided her, limb by limb, into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the borders of Israel. It was so that all who saw it said, There was no such deed done nor seen from the day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak. Judges chapter 20. Then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was assembled as one man, from Dan even to Beersheba, with the land of Gilead to Yahweh at Mizpah. The chiefs of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 footmen who drew sword. Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. The children of Israel said, Tell us, how did this wickedness happen? The Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered, I came into Gibeah, that belongs to Benjamin, I and my concubine, to lodge. The men of Gibeah rose against me and surrounded the house by night. They thought to have slain me, and they forced my concubine, and she is dead. I took my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and folly in Israel. Behold, you children of Israel, all of you, give here your advice and counsel." All the people rose as one man, saying, "We will not any of us go to his tent, neither will we any of us turn to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. And we will take 10 men of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 out of 10,000 to get food for the people, that they may do when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, according to all the folly that they have worked in Israel." So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, knit together as one man. The tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribes of Benjamin, saying, "What wickedness is this that has happened among you? Now therefore deliver up the men, the base fellows who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and put away evil from Israel." But Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the children of Israel. The children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities to Gibeah to go out to battle against the children of Israel. The children of Benjamin were numbered on that day out of the cities 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who were numbered 700 chosen men. Among all this people, there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at a hairbreadth and not miss. The men of Israel, besides Benjamin, were numbered 400,000 men who drew sword. All these were men of war. The children of Israel arose and went up to Bethel and asked counsel of God. And they said, "Who shall go up for us first to battle against the children of Benjamin?" Yahweh said, "Judah shall go up first." The children of Israel rose up in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. The men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel set the battle in array against them at Gibeah. The children of Benjamin came forth out of Gibeah and destroyed down to the ground of the Israelites on that day 22,000 men. The people, the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and set the battle again in array in the place where they set themselves in array the first day. The children of Israel went up and wept before Yahweh until evening, and they asked of Yahweh, saying, "Shall I again draw near to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother?" Yahweh said, "Go up against him." The children of Israel came near against the children of Benjamin the second day. Benjamin went forth against them out of Gibeah the second day and destroyed down to the ground of the children of Israel again 18,000 men. All these drew the sword. Then all the children of Israel and all the people went up and came to Bethel and wept, and sat there before Yahweh and fasted that day until evening. And they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before Yahweh. The children of Israel asked of Yahweh, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, "Shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother, or shall I cease?" Yahweh said, "Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver him into your hand." Israel set ambushes all around Gibeah. The children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the third day and set themselves in array against Gibeah, as at other times. The children of Benjamin went out against the people and were drawn away from the city, and they began to strike and kill of the people, as at other times in the highways, of which one goes up to Bethel, and the other to Gibeah, in the field about 30 men of Israel. The children of Benjamin said, "They're struck down before us as at the first." But the children of Israel said, "Let us flee and draw them away from the city to the highways." All the men of Israel rose up out of their place and set themselves in array at Baal Tamar. And the ambushers of Israel broke forth out of their place, even out of Ma'arah Geba. There came over against Gibeah 10,000 chosen men out of all Israel, and the battle was severe. But they didn't know that evil was close on them. Yahweh struck Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel destroyed of Benjamin that day 25,100 men. All these drew the sword. So the children of Benjamin saw that they were stuck, for the men of Israel gave place to Benjamin, because they trusted the ambushers, whom they had set against Gibeah. The ambushers hurried and rushed on Gibeah, and the ambushers drew themselves along and struck all the city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed sign between the men of Israel and the ambushers was that they should make a great cloud of smoke rise up out of the city. The men of Israel turned in the battle, and Benjamin began to strike and kill of the men of Israel about 30 persons, for they said, "Surely they are struck down before us, as in the first battle." But when the cloud began to arise up out of the city in a pillar of smoke, the Benjamites looked behind them, and behold, the whole of the city went up in smoke to the sky. The men of Israel turned, and the men of Benjamin were dismayed, for they saw that evil had come on them. Therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel to the way of the wilderness. But the battle followed hard after them, and those who came out of the cities destroyed them in its midst. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, and trod them down at their resting place, as far as over against Gibeah, toward the sunrise. There fell of Benjamin 18,000 men. All these were men of valor. They turned and fled toward the wilderness, to the rock of Rimmon, and there they gleaned of them in the highways 5,000 men, and followed hard after them to Gedom, and struck of them 2,000 men, so that all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, and stayed in the rock of Rimmon 4 months. The men of Israel turned again on the children of Benjamin and struck them with the edge of the sword, both the entire city and the livestock, and all that they found. Moreover, all the cities which they found, they set on fire. Judges chapter 21. Now the men of Israel had sworn in Mizpah, saying, "There shall not any of us give his daughter to Benjamin as wife." The people came to Bethel and sat there until evening before God, and lifted up their voices and wept severely. They said, "Yahweh, the God of Israel, why has this happened in Israel, that there should be today one tribe lacking in Israel?" It happened on the next day that the people rose early and built there an altar and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. The children of Israel said, "Who is there among all the tribes of Israel who didn't come up in the assembly to Yahweh?" For they had made a great oath concerning him who didn't come up to Yahweh to Mizpah, saying, "He shall surely be put to death." The children of Israel grieved for Benjamin their brother, and said, "There is one tribe cut off from Israel this day. How shall we provide wives for those who remain, since we have sworn by Yahweh that we will not give them of our daughters to wives?" They said, "What one is there of the tribes of Israel who didn't come up to Yahweh to Mizpah?" Behold, there came none to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were numbered, behold, there were none of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead there. The congregation sent there 12,000 men of the most valiant, and commanded them, saying, "Go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, with the women and the little ones. This is the thing that you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every male and every woman who is lain with a man." They found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known man by lying with him. And they brought them to the camp to Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. The whole congregation sent and spoke to the children of Benjamin who were in the rock of Rimmon, and proclaimed peace to them. Benjamin returned at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead. And yet so they weren't enough for them. The people grieved for Benjamin because that Yahweh had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. Then the elders of the congregation said, "How shall we provide wives for those who remain, since the women are destroyed out of Benjamin?" They said, "There must be an inheritance for those who are escaped of Benjamin, that a tribe not be blotted out from Israel. However, we may not give them wives of our daughters, for the children of Israel had sworn, saying, Cursed is he who gives a wife to Benjamin. They said, Behold, there is a feast of Yahweh from year to year in Shiloh, which is on the north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and on the south of Lebonah. They commanded the children of Benjamin, saying, Go and lie in wait in the vineyards, and see, and behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards, and each man catch his wife of the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. It shall be, when their fathers or their brothers come to complain to us, that we will say to them, Grant them graciously to us, because we didn't take for each man his wife in battle, neither did you give them to them. Otherwise you would now be guilty. The children of Benjamin did so, and took them wives according to their number, of those who danced, whom they carried off. They went and returned to their inheritance, built the cities, and lived in them. The children of Israel departed there at that time, every man to his tribe and to his family, and they went out from there, every man to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes.